Hey there, and welcome back to the Board Game Sherpa channel, the channel that helps take the fear out of board gaming and keeps the fun in. Today's episode is a little bit different. I interviewed Jon Reynolds of Nemesis Comics and Games, formerly Bob's Collectibles, up in Hamburg, New Jersey. Nemesis is one of the best comic and game shops around, and I usually stop in when I'm in the area. And I usually pick up something really cool at a great price. When I was there a few weeks ago, I picked up a Flash comic with my first appearance of Trickster, which, if you know my love for the Flash Rogues Gallery, it's huge to me. I also picked up the board game Patchwork, which is how the idea for this episode began. When Jon rang Patchwork up for me, it was way below the normal cost, and I asked him why it was so cheap. He told me he was not going to be able to carry board games in stock anymore. He'd still be able to special order individual games for customers, but Nemesis wasn't going to be carrying a large board game inventory anymore. Now, this sucks big time, since there are only 3 other decent board game shops within an hour drive of my house in New Jersey. I'm not counting stores like Target and Walmart that carry very basic games like Monopoly and Life. Barnes & Noble has a bit more of a varied selection, but they only carry the most popular hobby games. Let's put it this way, I'm not going to find a copy of Luchador or Role Player in Barnes & Noble. Losing another great source of board games locally really hurts. This is not the first comic and gaming shop that I was a regular customer of who decided to drop board games from their shelves, and I had to find out why. So, I went directly to the source to find out. I interviewed Jon about the store and why Nemesis made the decision to stop carrying board games, and his answers may surprise you. I had some preconceived ideas why, but there's a lot more that went into the decision. And for you board gamers who have a great local shop, you better take heed before these exact same reasons kill your favorite board game shop. Cue the interview. Tell me about Nemesis and the origins and Bob's Collectibles, whatever you want to tell me.
So, origin of Nemesis Comics and Games was when I was a kid. I used to come here. It was Bob's Collectibles back then. Bob Adams started that back in the early 80s. I was coming here in the 90s playing Magic the Gathering, picking up Dungeons and Dragons books. I was buying my comics here. Bob was a little bit more spread out of the things that he carried. He did a lot more with coins, sports cards, collectible action figures, mainly like the McFarlane series, because he was definitely friends with a lot of the sculptors from McFarlane, so he had a lot of like the McFarlane's dragons and things like that. But as time went on, Bob was doing this for almost 37 years. So between the one over on 23 and then here for the most part. There were a couple of smaller places between. But in 2017, he was just kind of done. He'd been doing it for 37 years. Yeah. Asked if I wanted to buy the shop. We figured that part out, and then I transformed it into what we have at this location now, where we've changed the name to Nemesis Comics and Games. Swapped a little bit away from some of the things Bob used to do. He used to have the coins, but we swapped more into board games, a lot more into Dungeons and Dragons and Magic, and then we kept the comics because that's just the history of the shop. But I mean, those are the things I was passionate about as coming into this. Doing the comic book shows is a big part of it, being a part of the community for that. And then building a community for the gaming in the area for Magic, Dungeons and Dragons, board games.
What would you consider the store right now? Was it a comic shop, a game shop, or?
I'd say it's more of a gaming shop. I mean, I do love the comics, and we have a lot of comics over on the other side, but our community that comes in on a daily basis, Mondays we have Dungeons and Dragons going. We have, I think there's 20 players with 4 DMs. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays we're running Magic the Gathering, and then on Saturdays we're running Yu-Gi-Oh! We used to have more like demo board games, but the community just hasn't been there for that in the area. I mean, we are in the middle of nowhere.
Tell us where you are.
We are in Hamburg, New Jersey. We're in basically the northernmost part of New Jersey. We are about like 2 miles from Mountain Creek South. And then that obviously north is where the water park is.
When Bob was here, he didn't have board games?
He did not carry board games at all.
But
he had Monopoly, I think, a little bit. But when I bought the shop back in 2017, he had walked away from Magic, walked away from the role-playing games. He was running Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments weekly, but that was the only gaming he did anymore.
Gotcha. All right, so when you came in, you introduced board games to the store.
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever a point where it was, like to say the word profitable, was it a term where it was popular?
I had a lot of people that were interested in it, would ask questions, come in and ask like, hey, would you carry this game? And that was things that really made me start to bring it in. I brought in like Munchkin, I went into Asmodee's Top 40 list. We carried a lot of board games at that time. But situations happened where we didn't end up with a crowd. I'd run, I think originally it was like every Tuesday we had open gaming. You can come and play any game. And occasionally we would have somebody come in for that. But it didn't happen as often as I would have expected with as many questions
Could people
to carry.
Their own games? Or was it
They could have brought their own games. It was just open gaming. Bring in, we have the table space for everybody to play.
Gotcha. Okay, so that was one day a week and no one came.
Nobody would come. It is a lot of work to bring groups together, and that's why I put so much work into the community for Magic and Dungeons and Dragons. At this point, when I first started bringing Dungeons and Dragons into the shop in like 2017, we had one group. There was a group of 5 guys that were coming every week to play, and now 5-6 years later, we're at 20 players. And I can't even put any more players in the shop for that because there's so much talking over each other that it's hard to DM over.
Okay, so you do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons now.
Yes.
Why do you think there's more? Why do you think there's more activity towards Dungeons and Dragons than board games?
I think it's the cost, right? Dungeons and Dragons, you buy one book and you can play, whereas the board gaming. At this point, you talk about games like Gloomhaven or, things like that are $140+ where, you go to Asmodee's Top 40 and you have, $70 to $90 games. And that's a big commitment to it. And yeah, well, you could split that between the group of players, but one person owns that game, And a lot of those bigger games are one-time playthrough, whereas Dungeons and Dragons, you have a DM that can run one campaign and they have their own storyline, and then you finish that and somebody else just makes up something new.
Gotcha.
And cost
the rules
is
are the same.
Yeah, the rules stay the same between each individual.
So you don't have to learn a new game every time.
Exactly. So there's a lot of learning rules. I mean, board games, Magic, all these games have a lot of rules. So to someone new coming in, it's overwhelming sometimes. People don't realize that to be able to play your game, you have to treat new players right. That's what builds the community back up.
Right.
If you are good to the new players coming in, they're going to be like you and entrenched in that game.
You're recently in the process of getting out of board gaming.
Yeah, so that's a hard one for me. I do wish that the board gaming community was stronger here. But, I mean, with Amazon and Walmart and all these big box stores having the games for cheaper sometimes than even I can get them at my cost, right? Like, you look at what we pay for the games and then the margins on those games, it's insane. I'm not going to actually get into pricing on that, but it can be insane where I look at things and then I just happen to be at Walmart to pick up like oil for my car or something like that, and I look at it and I'm like, wait, how is that so cheap? You can
get it cheaper at Walmart than your distributor.
And then put it on my, and then if I put it on my wall for what the distributor says I'm supposed to be selling this for, it never sells.
Right.
And then the better games, let's be honest about that. You're seeing the better games all on Kickstarter, right? We just recently saw the Kickstarter get fulfilled for the Binding of Isaac Complete Collection. That card game is amazing, a lot of fun. We very commonly have somebody bring a copy of it and we end up playing. But he is very much a part of that community. He loves that game. Well, I have no distributor that sells me that game, right? I would have had to have kickstarted that with a lot of those Kickstarters will have like a store option where you're getting like 10, 15 copies of it to put on your wall.
Right.
And yeah, it'll have a margin, but it's not a lot. But once the game's out there, I can't get it for a discount to be able to sell to you. So you have to go to the original person. But they've only done one print run. Gloomhaven had that problem where it was released, you couldn't get it for a long time, and then they did a Kickstarter to do a second print run. But Kickstarter is where some of the best games are even coming out right now. I'm not going to stop selling games. If you came in and you said, hey, I need a copy of Patchwork, I will still get it for you. And it'll take a couple of days. Typically, if you tell me in the beginning of the week or the weekend, I'll have it by middle of the week. But some of those games, that people are looking for just are going to take months to get because
I gave you a game to find.
Exactly.
Comic Hunters.
And it's one that I talk to my distributors like I can't find this game.
If someone comes to Nemesis Comics to set up a board game group, just to come in and play the game because they don't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah.
Would that be something you guys are up to?
Yeah. I'm always willing to let people use their tables. I mean, certain nights are a little bit busier than others, so it would be our obvious, like our Dungeons and Dragons night and our Magic Commander night being our two busiest nights right now. But there are always tables that people can play. Like our Saturdays, we have our Yu-Gi-Oh going on, but there's still open tables. Like we have people come in and play Commander game here and there. They play different card games and things like that. But we have 36 seats set up at all times in the shop. So if somebody said, hey, I have like 5 guys that want to sit down at a table and play, no problem with that.
What would it take for board games to get back into your store?
It would take a community coming in and playing every week again, right? When we had, it's really what it comes down to is people coming in to play and then every once in a while buying. Dungeons and Dragons, people aren't buying dice or books every time they come in the store, but it's an occasional thing. Right. And it's the community drives it. It's not a huge profit margin on books, but people are coming in and enjoying themselves and being here. It's having the community here. And right now with no community for board games, it's hard to want to keep it on the shelves.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Is there anything here you want to promote?
I mean, we've gone over a lot of it. We as I said earlier, we have events every day of the week. We have Magic 3 days a week, and being Tuesday Modern, Wednesday Commander, Friday we run Pioneer, we run Dungeons and Dragons on Mondays, and Yu-Gi-Oh on Saturdays.
Okay.
And I guess like the biggest thing is just promoting community. If you want to play, it doesn't matter what game it is, whether it's board games, card games, role-playing games, you gotta be welcoming to new players. And without being welcoming, there's gonna be no community, there's gonna be no game.
Huge thanks to Jon Reynolds and Nemesis Comics in Hamburg for sitting down with me and explaining why there just aren't a lot of board game stores anymore. If you're lucky enough to have a good board game store nearby, cherish it. Support it as much as you can. Yes, Amazon can be cheaper, but you get so much more supporting the little guy, especially if these are the better stores that actually foster a gaming community. Speaking from personal experience, these gaming meccas are invaluable. You get to meet like-minded individuals and have an in-person community where you can create lifelong friendships and try out games you'd never even consider before. Yes, there are bad and unwelcome stores out there, and I'd love to mention them, but that's not what this video is about. Just know you'll be able to spot them minutes after you walk through the doors. I'm definitely not suggesting you support those ones, but when you find the good ones, make sure you help keep them in business. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and give the video a big thumbs up. Just like with the board game shops and anything really, your support keeps this channel from going away. If you're in central New Jersey, the 3 best stores outside of Nemesis within an hour and a half are Time Warp in Cedar Grove, All-in-One Collectibles in Randolph, and Family Fun Hobbies in Hamilton, which is a huge store. I have no problems recommending any of those stores. If you have a great store, feel free to post their name, address, and why you think it's a great store in the comments. Just don't be spammy. That might actually work against the store. Just be sincere. See you next episode.